fuck up. It's time to talk business. Jared Taylor, Matt Best, and Evan Hafer proudly present Blackhearted. Sponsored by BlackRifle Coffee Company and Arson Wave.
Holy shit. Matt and Jared left me alone. I just invited a bunch of hot dudes over here to talk about business. Made one guest some coffee. Actually, I made everybody coffee, didn't I?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to start giving out tabs. Just say BlackRifle tabs so I can if you don't have a tab, if you don't have a tab, hit the slab, right? That'd be the first tab you get, right? Did you go to Ranger School?
No, never.
All right. So who do we have here today? So we got Sean Matson, his business partner, which I'll let you introduce yourself. We've got Frank, and I'll let you introduce yourself. So we'll just take the round table approach here. Immediately to my right, go ahead and start it off, Sean.
So Sean Matson did 10 years in the Navy, got out about a year and a half ago, started a company called Mabach, and then a company called Strikeforce Energy with Bruce Schley.
So Bruce Schley, a serial entrepreneur,
Nice.
Lots of manufacturing experience, IP work, stuff like that. Started a company called Helical Robotics about 7 years ago. Met Sean through that, and then we kicked off Strikeforce.
Right on. Frank Proctor with Way of the Gun Performance Shooting. Started this out as an Army Special Forces dude. Got into competitive shooting. Taught some of that stuff, a little blend. Wanted to get some products built, developed, made. Been working that gig for a little while. Been doing Way of the Gun since 2012.
Nice. And just to be clear, guys, I'm a fan of each and every one of the people here, the products they put out. I've got a little bit of history in patents, prototyping, and crowdfunding. So the first business that I had stepping out of the contracting world was a company called Twist Rate. It was to crowdfund, and you remember because I'd actually reached out to Sean about a couple different things that he was doing, and we were just trying to basically help military veteran entrepreneurs get their things protected first, either prototype or protected, so you wouldn't get those things stolen, basically. And then we were just moving to try to get them funded. Ultimately, it just couldn't get off the ground because, a lot of different reasons. Guys are super skeptical about their intellectual property, even though you have one of the, we were working with the second largest IP firm in the United States. And that wasn't good enough for a lot of guys. I can't show them this new fucking gun widget. And I'm like, bro, the market for what you created is you're going to sell maybe 100 of these.
Right.
But you're going to go to the fucking mats trying to protect it, and it'll never see the light of day. That was just one of the reasons. Inventors, not all inventors are businessmen, which is a fucking great conversation to have. But, I guess first and foremost, I'm going to kind of continue to work the table. How did you get into the invention side of things with Matt Bach? And I'll start with you, Sean.
Yeah, so my business partner, Zach Steinbach, that's how we got Matt Bach out of it. Took part of my last name, part of his last name, and came up with a company. And we were flying to Alaska during training, and we're building a pallet, military pallet, 463 Lima pallet, and saw the process that putting the cargo nets on, and we were like, this is absolutely fucking ridiculous.
It is.
That we took this much of a time, and then we build this pallet and show it to the load master, and immediately he's like, wrong, tear it all down, redo it. And so you spend 6 hours building one pallet, get it on the bird finally, get up there. We flew for 8 hours from San Diego up to Alaska, and the entire 8 hours, he and I just sat there and redesigned the whole thing. Like, everyone else is sleeping. We're sitting there just tinkering around. As soon as we got on the ground, we built our first prototype out of half-inch and staples. We just we just built it right there. We took a 1/5 model of it, built it all out, and said, all right, we need to figure out how to make this into a product. And we were going down the road of showing it and wanted to license it to the company that made the cargo nets, and figured we'll just sell it to them for millions and millions of dollars and walk out. And immediately, well, not immediately, I guess, like 3.5 years later, found out, okay, that's not going to happen, because everyone we talked to said you just need to go build it and build the first one, get a patent under it, and then see what it will do. And so we started and that's when we started the company actually in 2010, just to protect ourselves as we went to go talk to manufacturers about how this would work. And then the great story about that is that was our first patent issued, and we haven't sold one of them yet. So it's a great product, though. I mean, it has the potential to be, all UPS, FedEx, all of those pallets run off of the exact same cargo net system. So there's a huge potential, but we've sold none. So it's a great fun story to have. So.
And so just your right.
Yeah, Bruce. And then we started working on the VBSS robot. So they have vertical robots, and
So that's how you guys got connected with specifically for the robot?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. He knows way more about robotics and that world than I do. But we were looking for a specific technology. We knew the gap was there, and everyone's tried to use poles and other things like that to solve the problem, and they're garbage because once you try to climb a container ship, you have to do a 2-stage climb. You can't get up there. So we said, let's not go down the road of building another pole. There's got to be another way to do it. So people are looking at drones, and those have their own issues with it, and so we knew it had to be a robot. And we found Bruce and Helical Robotics from that, and I'll let Bruce go from there.
Yeah, Helical was an interesting, like every other story that's any good, right? I got really drunk one night, and let's solve some of the world's problems.
Right.
So a buddy of mine was painting wind turbine blades, right? And they're 300
Painting what?
wind turbine blades,
Oh,
like
okay,
commercial
wind turbine.
generators.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
And they were way behind schedule and over budget. He's bitching about it. And his night job as a bartender. And I'm like, well, let's put a robot up there. I'd worked around automotive manufacturing and steel fabrication, and you can do amazing things with a robotic arm. He's like, there is no way in hell that you can put a robot 300 feet in the air. I'm like, fuck you, dude. I can do that. I'd never built a robot before. I didn't go to school for engineering. Had a lot of smart friends. And the next day I couldn't get out of my head and called my brother who was working at NASA at the time and said, hey, you think we could put a robotic arm 300 feet in the air? He's like, I don't see why not. So I flew him up to Madison, Wisconsin, where I was living, and Helical Robotics was formed. Our first robot used compression wrapped around things, right? Because our idea was we'd put this thing out on a wind turbine blade, it'd drive back and forth, and it'd be able to, paint it and sand it and all this shit.
Okay, right.
So that's where the helical name comes from, because it had to wrap around on itself. So we built this first prototype, right, and it was $100,000, $150,000 of my money. And we put it on, it was 14 feet long, hundreds of moving parts. We put it on a pipe, and the fucking thing fell off. It's like, oh, damn it. Right, so, we've got all this time and all this effort into it, and the first one falls on the floor. My brother looks at me, and his eyes get big, and I'm like, well, we better figure this out. So we simplified it a bunch. Ultimately, it was way over-engineered, way underbuilt. It was just a crap design.
Right.
So that's our first patent was for a compression robot that wrapped around stuff. We invented a wheel to make it all work, a very specific kind of mecanum wheel. So I did reinvent the wheel.
Oh, nice.
It's a pretty cool when you see it, and like we've done like SOFIC and some other trade shows in the defense industry, and you see this robot going up and down the steel sheet, and you see people just like, oh, that's crazy, and then you see it doing 360s and running up and down and all over the place, and everyone's like, wait, how does it do that?
Right. All
because of the new wheel design. So.
Yeah, it's they say necessity is the mother of invention, right? But necessity is a motherfucker, and that's why we run into this problem, and you're like, oh, well, I can fix that.
Right.
But it never goes like it's supposed to, right? And you come up with this idea, and you're like, oh, I'm going to invent this, and somebody's going to show up. They're going to pay me millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Like we just certified a robot with Chevron. It took 4 years.
Right.
And it's getting deployed next month. We're doing a deal with a Berkshire company right now. And it's like it's never good enough. They'll show up and they're like, "Oh, this is amazing, right? We're doing this automated tank inspection robot, and we can do
like a water tank or military
vessel."
Got it.
Yeah, vessel.
Got it.
But
It's a vessel.
Yeah, it's special. But, we're saving people what was a 3-day job. We can do it in 3 hours. And they came up and they're like, that's really good, but we'd like it to be fully autonomous. We just want to drop it in the tank and come back, an hour and a half later. There can't be a guy here. And it's like, right now it takes 3 guys 3 days to do this.
Right.
And I can do it in 3 hours with a guy that's just sitting up there driving it like a drone. But that's not good enough. So let's spend another $500,000. Let's screw around for, 2 years to try to make it fully autonomous. And Google hasn't been able to make it fully autonomous yet. Right? Like the Google car, they've spent billions of dollars, and it's taken years. And but they come in, they're like, 3 days, 3 hours. No, you got to do it in an hour and a half, and there can't be a person involved. And it's just, but we'll figure it out.
So basically, what you have is you've got the ability to take something that somebody's already doing. Like, okay, it takes 3 guys, and then I want you to do the impossible, because you know what? I might as well just like give you an impossible task. Go for it.
Well, the thing is in anything like this, you've given them a little bit of taste of
Right.
it, and now they're like,
Oh,
if
yeah.
they can do that,
Well,
they
then
can
they can do
obviously
this.
do this.
Right.
And it's like, well, if we would have been able to, we probably would have done that. That bridge might be too far. Like it's
Right.
outside of either material engineering or whatever, right? And cost goes into all of those. So, they're going to ask for it, and sometimes that's what makes the deal or doesn't make the deal.
Right. And so we've also got Frank here, so I want to kind of introduce him. So pull on in, pull this chair in here, Frank. And, he's got a ton of cool stuff that he's invented. If you haven't checked him out, it's wayofthegun.us, and that's a little plug, but check out some of the stuff that he's doing. Talk about your experience with inventing, prototyping, manufacturing.
Yeah, man. How I got started as a kid was always the dude like taking stuff apart,
Right.
find out how it worked. Sometimes it didn't go back together, but how it worked, how to make it better.
Right.
First job in the Army, I was a mechanic.
Really?
Later on, got into SF. I was tired of the Army. I was in Germany for like 3 years whenever there was a mechanic, and like, ooh, Special Forces. They had the posters and stuff. I was like, hell yeah, I want to do that. Who don't, And get all the way down the bottom. You got be in the Army for 4 years and be an E5. I was like, I'm only going to do this for 3 years. I'm already tired of it. Peace. Go back home, do the mechanic. I did that in the Army. Did it on the civilian side for a little while. Found out about 20th Special Forces group.
Nice.
And right after 9/11 there, I was like, hell yeah, let's do this. Been doing that since. So my inner mechanic, tinkerer kind of guy kicked back in when I started shooting.
Right.
I started doing that kind of shooting, and none of the gear's gone. None of it worked. As well as it could.
Right.
So I'm over there on the back of a pickup truck with a hacksaw, cutting shit off my rifle. Like, hey, there's got to be a way to make this better. Like, yup, it's better. It looks like crap, but it works.
Right.
Always had kind of a minimalist approach to all of it. The less crap you got to carry that can do multiple things, the better off in life you are. So moved on, started doing my own company kind of thing. All the way.
And I think it's important. Like you're an accomplished shooter, so you go ahead and kind of tell the crowd, I guess, exactly like.
On the shooting side of the house, my first exposure to the kind of stuff I'm doing now was cephalic.
Yeah.
The shooting CQB school for our SF guys. I did that and I loved it. That was the first thing I did after the course. And I was like, man, this is awesome. It's part of my job. I want to be really good at it. Got to come back and work as an assistant instructor at the program there for a while.
Right.
Did some deployments in between that, and then started doing competitive shooting around 2007. I was always I was the tactical shooter. I was like, no, man, that stuff's gay. It's not what we do. It's not real. I went out there, and like I said, I was the primary instructor for combat marksmanship for the whole group. I was the dude for shooting, and I went to my first match. I was like, ooh. Wow. There's a lot that I don't know, man. I didn't even know what I didn't know, man.
Yep.
But I got hooked on competitive shooting. I want to do well at it. Didn't want to lose, I want to win. Put a bunch of time into that. Made Grandmaster in limited division in USPSA and just a puzz over a year.
Nice.
Started bringing some of that stuff back to the boys, stuff that was seeing, about efficiency and what we're seeing, how to see faster and stuff like that, which makes a big difference on the CQB side of the house for sure. I thought I was bringing a lot back. In 2012, I started doing, teaching the way I'm now. Kind of a lot of open enrollment stuff, so I got a mix of different guys in the courses and stuff. And I really started learning a lot more about shooting and being a little bit more analytical and observing people. You know, instead of the way I did it in the Army, I was like, I'd be put out of a block of instruction. Sometimes I'd walk the line and help dudes out, or the AIs were mostly doing that.
Right.
But just me being the only guy and seeing a bunch of different folks and different backgrounds and stuff shooting, I was like, what is that? What's going on there? You know, watching videos of myself and other shooters, like really learned a ton more about shooting, just thinking about it more and seeing. And then all along, being on the range, shooting and wanting gear to make this easier, easier, lighter, less bulk, whatever, so ideas are coming into my mind. I guess the first thing I really kind of put out there was the sling. Mm-hmm. I remember, and it started in probably 06, ran the VTAC sling quite a bit. I was a single point sling dude for a while.
Yeah.
I went to a master breacher course run by a crazy man. And
like a real crazy person?
Yeah, legit,
right.
Legit crazy. So, pro timer
hitting the head one too many times.
Yeah.
So
a little overpressure.
Yeah.
Overpressure's fucking.
Yeah. So pro timer breaching and shit.
Oh.
Rate teams racing against each other. Yeah, it was cool, man. So you start putting some emphasis on getting in.
Yeah.
Some of it are wailing array with a ram, and this rifle and this 2-point or single point sling just all over the place. Like, there's got to be a better way. There is. It's a 2-point sling, right? So, that's about that time too. I started becoming more than just a CQB kind of rifle shooter. I was like, hey, this thing's a rifle. There's a whole lot of stuff we got to do before we get to a structure, right? So, started putting more of that into our program. Checked in a bunch of Kyle Lamb stuff, and working in and around vehicles. The way I had the sling attached before with like QDs and all that crap up on the front of the rifle. Turn that dude over to the side and got this big old pivot point up there on the front. Like, got to be another way. So I started tying that sling on with 550 cord. And then, over time I was like, man, there's got to be a way to have a little bit less bulky sling. And remember I bought all kinds of materials and buckles and all this stuff, and I'm back home and I'm down in my basement all night I was always down there messing with guns and cutting on stuff and loading ammo, all this stuff, and come up out of my basement one night, show my wife, she's like, this is it, I got it. She was like, okay, right on. So that was a sling, and then later on some other stuff, the pistol sights. I couldn't find pistol sights that gave me the things I wanted to see. I was really wired into what we're seeing when we're shooting, and if it's not right, it bugs the hell out of me, and if what I'm seeing in the sights makes it harder as a shooter, so couldn't find the combinations, dimensions that I wanted. Nobody made it. Trying to find people to make, your ideas.
Yeah,
that's just hard.
Well, and we should talk about that. Like, let's talk about just the making process, because, I do have a little bit of familiarity with this, and I would tell guys all the time, and especially if I had any question on whether or not they could actually fulfill something, in the sense of, dude, just make one. I know that's a great idea, but guys have a million great ideas. But just seeing the follow through and being able to, like, okay, I made one. And where do you go to make some of this shit? Because, like, we've had, I don't know, God, collectively thousands of cool ideas that have never gone anywhere, because the maker space it's a hard one to navigate. And between all of us here, I mean, what are your outlets, man? Like, Sean, talk a little bit about, like, the making process. So once you have an idea, where do you go?
The first thing build like you said, you have to build the first prototype. So, like, we built that 1/5 model, and we thought we nailed it. Like, we're like, this is awesome. And it wasn't until a couple years later when we actually built the full scale, and actually put it out there and feel what it's going to look like as scale. And we're sitting there in my grandma's drapery sewing shop. She used to make a bunch of custom drapes and stuff, and so she's helping us build this whole thing. And again, the pallets are massive. They're 105 inches by 89 inches long. So we're moving all of this fabric around, or the nylon around, and realized very quickly this is a pain in the ass.
Right.
And so she was like, well, what if we just built integrated some bags into it? And we're like, that's fucking genius. All right, we're gonna do that. And so then the bags hold all the side nets into them, and then they collapse over themselves. So now you can take this whole net and put on top of the cargo, on top of your load, and then open it and drapes all the way down onto it, and then clips in from the bottom, and then you're off into your put it onto the bird. Well, we would have never figured that out if we wouldn't have done a full scale. And I think, so you have the idea, right? And you know, we haven't even gotten into whether you're going to patent it or not or anything like that, but we had the idea. For us specifically, we knew we could go get a patent, or we were really confident that we could. So, but we needed to understand how the product was going to get put together first. And but that took a long time for us to realize that, because we were trying to push our idea onto someone else, and that's not where they wanted to go. The current cargo net has not been redesigned since World War II. So
that's impressive.
So
considering like how many of those fucking things have been flown around, like how many billions of dollars have been spent flying cargo nets around the earth.
It's a $36 million a year contract, right?
Oh god.
They make 44,000 new nets every single year. They repair over triple that, and so that's part of the contract,
right?
And I mean, so the potential, like I said, is there. Huge. Like we knew it, and we would talk to investors, we would talk to these guys, and it's like, why wouldn't you invest in us? And it's like, because you haven't shown us that you can do this, right? So going back to that, and they want to see you push. It's your idea, it's your baby. The only people, or the only person that's going to see this to the end is the inventor, and you have to get that through the finish line, and whatever that looks like. You know, for us, it was get the full scale prototype built. We got that built, and then we had to figure out what the manufacturing was going to look like.
Right.
And then you establish manufacturing, and you know, kind of rest is history. And I said earlier, you know, we haven't sold one of them yet, but we're really proud of it because it was our first patent, it was our first idea, and but we had along the way, we had other ideas and other patents and other people, or other patentable, I guess, products that guys kept bringing us. And I said, look, Zach and I made the conscious effort. Like, we're not going to help anyone else. We're not going to start inventing other products until we can get this one through the finish line.
Right.
Period. And you know, we lost time and probably money and other things like that with that, but I had to prove that we understood that we could make whatever it is that someone could bring us, right? And so that manufacturing process, the rapid prototyping, and you know, so on and so on. So,
you know, it's interesting because your experience was we had to prove that we had to do this, and like my business partner and I, we would talk about that all the time, which is just complete it, just something shows some type of inertia moving forward other than conceptualizing and then talking, right? Because that does nothing. It's like, it's basically hot air where you're just like, yeah, dude, I think, and I mean, how many times have you heard a good idea from another team guy, specifically, you know? And I mean, I don't know how many fucking ideas that I've heard about.
The good idea fairy.
The good idea fairy, like just spiking up. And you, after a while, you just want to take a fucking hammer and start bashing it around because you're like, guys, it doesn't matter. Like, you could talk to me about, no, dude, what I did was I just fucking solved cancer in my mind brain, you know, and I'm just talking about it right now. Like, why don't you do something with it? I'm like, dude, you still have to push it across the line. You still have to, the guy that takes the idea has still got to have some type of vested interest in making sure that that idea has the natural inertia to move. And if you're not like driving that, it's going to be shelved, categorized, and you'll walk back to it 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, 30 years later and go, that was a fucking good idea. But I didn't do anything with it.
Didn't do anything, yeah.
A lot of people have a real tough time making that conscious effort to do it, because then you're really holding yourself out there, right? Like,
right.
I've got this great idea and we could do this and we could save the world. You're like, okay, then do it. And there's more than the money and the capital and the time investment. There's, if I really build this, it might fail.
Yeah.
And nobody admits it, but that's like you're thinking about it, and do we want to try this? And most of those ideas die,
right?
Because the people are afraid to fail. And I can't tell you how many times we failed as we've been building, the robots or the energy drink. Like, the energy drink is probably, I bet there was 10,000 formulations if there was one.
Wow.
Before, because none of us had come from the beverage space, right? This was my uncle.
Yeah.
owned a warehouse. he had invented a machine that took silver nitrate out of photo developing solution, right? So when you develop a picture, you've got all this chemistry, and some of the shit in there is bad. They don't want to dump down the drain. So there was a push to clean up the chemistry before it went down the drain. And he worked for Eckerd Drug, I think, at the time. And he's like, oh, I know I could figure out how to get this silver out of there. So he did, and built the company, and everything's singing right along. And then here comes digital photography, right? So now nobody's getting things developed. So he sells the company, winds up with his warehouse, rents it to a guy that's going to bottle some water, like gallon jugs of water. And there's no money in water, right? You got to sell thousands and thousands of gallons a day to make any money.
Right.
So the guy's not making enough money. And Bill says, well, dude, let's change it up. Why don't we make a good flavored water? Now, he'd never played with flavoring before, but he hops online, he starts doing some Googling, and he's like, this doesn't seem that hard. So, he gets into it, and he calls me up, and he's like, hey, I've got these gallons of water. I'm like, well, that's great, Bill. Try to sell some for me. So he sends some up to Madison, and I'm like, this is really good. People will buy it, but you can't ship it that far, right? You can only put like 4,000 or 5,000 gallons in a semi-truck, and you're making 30 cents, 40 cents a gallon. Well, you can't ship things. So, we said, hey, this is pretty neat, but how do we streamline it? And one day I was having a hot dog, and I eat a lot of hot dogs. And,
Lord Hot Dog's
Lord
not here
Hot
to.
Dogs.
He's not here to.
Yeah, I wish that Jared was here.
He might have one.
Yeah,
with
you
us.
guys would have like a 10-minute conversation about dogs,
Yep.
dogging it up.
I actually had one right before we got here, so
Yeah. So I'm putting ketchup on the hot dog, and I thought, we could put the chemistry in a packet like this. So I called up Bill, and I'm like, hey, let's put it in a little packet. Then we could ship it everywhere, right? And we build it in one place. But the idea came to help another guy out, right? So we get it all built. We show it to this guy. We put all the plumbing in, and he takes it to the largest grocer in Florida, and the guy's like, man, that's awesome. Why don't you make me 3,000 gallons, and I'll put it in my stores? And the guy's like, I don't have the time. Like, dude, you're not selling any damn water. We gave him the product, and then he refused to sell it. That was just too much work. Well, ultimately that guy went tits up, and that was that. But then energy drinks were just getting popular, and this is like 2010.
Right.
Meal wasn't out yet, and I said to my uncle, hey, let's design an energy drink. It can't be that hard, right? We'll throw some caffeine at it, throw some taurine at it, and then we'll be done. And but you don't know what you don't know until you get into it. But we did, and we got it all built, and it was going to be Double Tap was going to be the name of it, because it was twice the caffeine,
Got it.
twice everything of a Red Bull in this little pouch. So he filed the trademark, and then we got sued by the Double Cola Company.
What in the world?
Yeah, there's a company. It was the second largest cola company back in the 30s. Was a company called Double Cola, and now it's owned by a VC firm in London.
Right.
They sell it in like one state, and they sued us. And we're like, oh fuck. We got all the artwork's done, all the packaging is done, and we shelved the product. And then some other shit happened, and Bill decided he didn't want to be involved anymore. So, but I kept everything, and I thought, someday I'm going to find a market for this again. So when Sean had come down, and we designed it when we were doing it, we're like, this would be a perfect military product, right? Because it ships 50 to 1, right? So one pallet of this is equal to a container of a canned energy drink.
Right.
It's perfect for sending overseas.
Yeah.
So Sean comes over, to build robots, and he's drinking a Monster, Red Bull, or something.
Yuck.
And I'm like, hey,
disgusting.
Not BlackRifle coffee.
man. And I'd never met him before. We talked on the phone a couple of times. And I'm like, hey, try this. I hand him this packet of shit.
Right.
And he looks at me, he's like,
I'm still active at this point, and I say, am I gonna pop on my drug test?
Yeah.
What the fuck did you just give me? Like, this shit's really good, and then I was like, how can I be a part of this? Like, I know I can move this. I know that there's a market for it. I know that people are gonna enjoy this.
yeah. But I guess the point of the big long story is I sat on this thing for like 3 years after we shelved it, but I knew eventually I'd find a place to go with it, right? So you're always moving forward if you're going to get anywhere.
Right.
And sometimes it just takes forever. But as long as you're always pushing, right? And that's, I think, the key to being a good inventor, a good entrepreneur, really good at life, is that you got to have a thick skin, and everybody's going to tell you that you're nuts. Right. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. I'm going to paint my house. Well, you're fucking nuts, dude. Hire somebody for that. It's like, no, I can do it. But everybody is a hater at some point, right? Because you tell them you're going to do something, and they're like, well, I never do anything. Well, so I'm going to beat this person down, tell them they can't do it. You just keep pushing like that, and eventually you'll get someplace good. And someplace bad.
Jeff, he's over at the Ready Man side. He's got like 7 or 8 patents, and we beat things around. We were in Kuwait getting ready to move into Iraq. It's like 03, 02, right before the invasion. And we hated the gear that we had. Like, we hated it. It was fucking bulky, and we just started cutting shit off and taking it over to the sew shop. And at that time, there wasn't a Picatinny rail mount for the M2. So you didn't have anything for the M2, like zero. You had iron sights. And we're like, dude, we have lasers on our carbines, but bro, I kind of want that 50 cal at night. I kind of want that, these tracers are pretty dope, but I can't really do a lot with this. And so Jeff was like, well, shit, let's go over to the machine shop on Camp Doha. And we took a big block of aluminum. We started cutting on it. And, fast forward a little ways. Basically, Jeff had invented the first real, like, feed tray mounted, bolt-on M2 Picatinny rail system for the 50 cal. The problem with that, and that was kind of the genesis to some of this, was as soon as he released it into the wild, because he was like just trying to solve a problem. That's all he was doing, was just trying to solve a problem. And it worked. Did it work great? I can't say that it worked great, but it was a whole hell of a lot better than what we had. And as soon as he released it, it was copied.
Yeah.
It was copied, and it was stolen out from under him, and it was replicated, and the big companies that have big contracts, whack, and then he didn't have any protection, so he couldn't go back. Of course, he had prior art, but, that's super hard. And when you're fighting a company like, that has several $100 million contracts, they can just like wear you out. They're just going to overspend you, and it doesn't really fucking matter at the end of the day. You're a guy that's like, E7 in the military, they're going to outspend you, 1,000,000 to 1, and they're not going to care. And so we said, he and I talked a lot about this. Well, fool me once, right? So anything else that came out of Jeff's mind in this collaborative effort was like, okay, well, we have to have a relationship with a good IP firm. But, he continued to try to protect everything that he did just to make sure that if it was a good idea, and even if we went into the prototype phase, that at least it was protected, and we could prove that, hey, it's not only prior art, but we were the first to file, which it was good because ultimately the law changed. When was that?
Yep, 2 years ago.
That was, I think it was 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
4 years.
And for a provisional is relatively cheap. For you guys that don't know, a provisional patent is relatively inexpensive, especially if you let like a paralegal kind of run down the rabbit hole with it for a while, so you're not overspending as far as like the diligence, finding if there's anything out there that's going to conflict. We actually were doing so many at one point, we'd negotiated terms that any provisional coming across their desk was only going to cost no more than $500.
Right.
Which, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially with like you said earlier, the new laws. I mean, that's our, for Mapbox specifically, that's our practice right now. We file a provisional first, get it out there, start the filing process, make our additions and modifications over that next year to file then the full utility.
Right.
We found as a practice that works best for us because this industry changed so much, and there's a point too, and whether the juice is worth the squeeze. Like, right? Am I going to spend $10,000 on this patent and only make $2,000? Okay, well maybe it's not worth filing this patent on it.
Right.
But you got to look at all of those factors.
Yeah, have you gone through the patent process with any of your stuff, Frank?
No, not yet.
No.
I delved into it a little, but definitely like to hear what you got to say about it.
And it's really interesting because obviously I've taken a look at a lot of your stuff, like, and there's so many different buckets that you can start to look with a good IP attorney. They can say, no, let's go utility, let's go design, and there's a difference between those two things.
And then you also got process too. So if you've got something that, like for us, like for our cargo net, we have a utility patent and we also filed a process patent. So the process covers how it's all put together from, start to finish, of building it, manufacturing it, and then applying it onto whatever in result that you're trying to get. So that's the process part of it. And those all have different levels of cost. They also have different levels of protection back. A design patent is just that. As soon as you change a color, change slightly the design, you can get around a design patent in 2 seconds. And utility patents are supposed to be, the holy grail. You want to get a utility patent, but once you look at claims in your utility patent, you'll see some companies that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dependent claims and only one independent claim. Well, all I have to do is beat that one independent claim and I'm around it.
Right.
And as soon as you beat that one independent claim, everything else falls. So their patent is garbage.
Right.
And you see a lot of that. You see a lot of it anywhere. You start reading a patent and you're like, holy cow, this thing has, 300 claims. And you're like, well, how many independent claims is there? And it's like, well, 2. Okay, cool. Well, what are those? This and this. All right, I'm around that.
Right.
So then it's a whole educational process in that. But you have to learn that if you're going to get into patents at all, because you can easily get screwed and file for a patent, spend tens, 20,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a patent, and it's worth nothing, right? Like, great, I've got this patent. I use my own example, right? We spent all this money on a cargo net, and it has great potential. We've got the utility patent on it. We haven't sold one of them, so that patent to us is worthless.
Right.
Right. And unless someone wants to pay for it, but right now that patent is worthless. It's a negative. It's a loss for us as a company.
Right.
It's not an asset. So until we can start selling it and show and prove that there's a need for it.
Right.
So.
Well, in last year I came to SHOT and I had my business cards on they're little metal AR gas tool scrapers. They're scraper tools, basically. Had a little hook, had a ton of little tools. It's just a card, right? And I was passing out my card at SHOT Show. Everybody's like, man, that's a fucking badass card. Well, we designed it. We designed it. We sat down. We sketched it out. It was based off real AR tools, but we weren't breaking any patent. And we're giving these things away. We're not, but we did do due diligence. I had a guy come up to me. I was talking to a couple of my friends. I handed out my cards, and he's like, oh, this is really cool. You guys copied my patent. I'm like, actually, we work with Workman Nidegger, which is fairly substantial intellectual property firm, and we didn't. And if we violate it, bro, we'll be the first one. But I'm not really selling anything. I'm actually giving it away. So he wrote me a super nasty email, like cease and desist, and fucking and all I was going to do is like, well, we'll utilize this, and in the firearm space, what we'll do is we'll be able to sell custom business cards with this scraper tool. And I was like, I thought that was a fucking cool idea. For 75 cents a card, you could get, guys,
A tool out of it.
Yeah, a tool, and something that like nobody will forget that. And we read through his patent, and he had essentially patented the fork. That's what he was talking about. And it didn't have any, and you can just walk all over that thing. So I sent him a pretty nasty email back, like, dude, stop being an asshole, first of all. And second of all, here's my attorney. It doesn't really cost anything, but you can just communicate with him from this point forward. But the expectation that, one, you're just automatically going to be protected. That's not going to happen. You have to do the due diligence. You have to do the due diligence. you have to work with a reputable firm too, in the sense of you have to establish that relationship. So they're going to have several layers of protection. And, the other thing is you'll have to expect that people are going to challenge it. We've had at least 20 emails from rando people across the board saying you're in violation of our patent. We do a little bit of search. They either don't have a patent, they have no idea what they're actually talking about, and basically they're just trying to, cash in on the fact that you guys are just a couple dumb knuckle draggers that don't really know what you're doing. So it's like, well, yeah, I don't, but my attorney, he's pretty good at it, so you can have that conversation with him.
One of our first conversations that we had with our patent attorney, first thing he told us was, you can either pay me, whatever his rate is, $400 an hour to search Google, or you can do it yourself.
Right.
And we're like, well, okay, well, what do you mean by that? I'm willing to listen to this. And, he said, look, the internet's obviously very powerful. It's there. Use it. Right. He's like, I have other tools and, you're going to pay for those. But for your initial filing and just putting together a package, I want you to catalog every search word and term you'd use and then what results you got out of that. So we went through and we built a spreadsheet and say, okay, well, this word, cargo net, cargo net systems and blah, 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 and figure out all these different terms and patents and then, catalog all of those. And then we gave him all of that information and that was his starting point, right? So we just took out 8-9 hours of his work right there. And now he has references to go back and start looking and digging and saying, okay, well, here, in 2 hours of him looking at it, he can tell us if it's even worth going forward with, or, hey, look, we've got nothing here unless you can do X, Y, and Z. And so I always try to tell guys, that they'll bring us an idea or say, hey, I want to get this patent. I say, all right, step one, do this.
Right.
And that right there, that's sometimes a barrier of entry for people. And, as we just talked, like, they're not even willing to do that. Then I'm not wasting my time to help you on it. But, it's free. It's, you can go on the internet and look up. Now, the difference would be for if someone's filed a provisional patent on it already, you wouldn't see those. And that's what I'm saying. Like on the tool side of it, he can the attorney can actually go in and start seeing what provisional patents have been filed and, how many times they've been around the track with the examiners. So anyway, you're still going to have to pay for the attorney, but it's a lot less of a cost for people that, have an idea and want to get a patent and, maybe don't want to throw, 10 grand right off the first bat.
Well, and Google has the tool, it's Google Patents, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what I use.
Yeah, and it's specifically built for patent searching. So those of you guys that are looking, you've got Google as a common search term, what's populating, but then you also have specifically you can search patents under, I think it's Google.
Yeah, it's Google Patents. Yeah. And a friend of mine is an examiner at the U.S. Patent Office. And, there's also a government site, uspto.gov, right? So you can look for trademarks, copyrights, and patents on there. And for the most part, the government doesn't even use its own site. Google Patents is better.
Really?
So, yeah, it's like your patent pre-search is a big deal, but really Google it, right? And Google anything. So you've got an idea, and you want to make sure that you take lots of pictures. You keep your notes, right? You got to have your causal notes, and that saved us one time. We were working on a patent, and it'd gone through its first round of examination, and we got our office action, and and this one I bet we had $1 million into this patent.
Wow.
By the time it was, 2 years later, and we're just about to get it granted. And we'd actually pre-licensed the technology to a couple of Fortune 500 companies. So we're really hoping this thing comes together. It's like, man, you got years into it, and tons of money, and it's already licensed. And in the 11th hour, we get a call from the examiner. Hey, I found some technology that is similar to what you got that was patented by, I think it was GE or Boeing or somebody. Mm-hmm. And
we're gonna fight that one.
We had had our file date right in front of them, but the file date was okay, but they wanted to see first use practice. So, I'm going back through everything, and it's like the first thing that we'd ever built, we built this mock-up out of plywood.
Right.
And this is an omnidirectional robot that uses magnets to hold it on a surface. And it'd never been done before. So we had, going back through my phone, I had this picture of this plywood cart with magnets on it stuck to the side of a dumpster. Right. So this was a real professional looking picture.
Right.
But, before we really got into it, we wanted to see if it would work. Right. Because what we're using is like coefficient of friction times the magnetic downforce, and you have to be able to overcome the weight of the system plus whatever your payload is.
Right.
So that's how we mocked it up, and that picture got us the patent.
Wow.
And I mean, so you got $1 million riding on this picture of a piece of plywood with some wheels on it stuck to a dumpster. So you want to make sure that one, you keep track of everything,
right.
and do yourself a favor and go out and do the Google search, do the Yahoo search. And you also want to do some searching on foreign Google, right? So google.eu, .uk, and then generally when we file with the PCT first, right? So we let the Europeans examine it, and then we file with the U.S. right after that. Being in the tech space. There are certain countries where we need to file. We don't file in China, however.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
One of the things that we used to, when we first got started, we were getting trolled by China real hard. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hits an hour on the website. So we took, we put a link to the Tiananmen Square massacre
Perfect.
on our website.
That's awesome.
And said, helical robotics supports free economy, free market in China.
That's awesome.
And then the Great Firewall of China steps in, right? Because they can't access that. So
Right.
Ding.
we went from hundreds of hits an hour to like 3 hits every 6 months.
Right. So just a lesson in like, okay, well, if I can create my own little firewall just through a little bit of political disruptive intent. And, the funny thing is like we talk like, on this podcast, we've had like, I don't know now, we've had like probably 30 businessmen. Most of the guys that we talk to, they're idea guys. Like that's their thing. Like entrepreneurs are typically they're idea guys, and they have this relationship, and it's an intimate relationship with the aspects of business that are fairly siloed as far as like, okay, I've got operations over here, logistics and fulfillment and marketing, and you've got all these buzzwords. There's not a lot of familiarity out there with the patents, patent protection, the ideas that can truly like separate your company from other companies and make like a substantial value proposition, especially if you're trying to tee the company up for acquisition later on down the road, and or if you're just trying to create a barrier. So, in the market space, and that's one of the things we've been really active about in BlackRifle is we're not only establishing like direct trade relationships with countries in order to make sure that those contracts increase the value of the company. I'm trying to increase the value of the company every day, but now we're inventing specifically, coffee related products that we can license. So, improving the nature of the business. So it's not just a marketing mechanism where we roast coffee, we drink coffee. So we are subject matter experts. And the cool thing about invention, and I tell this to guys all the time, it's like, man, I think I've hit kind of a plateau. I can't really sell more. I've kind of plateaued, and a lot of businesses, especially with entrepreneurs that are really trying to bootstrap everything, they hit an economic plateau. And you're laughing because you know what I'm talking about. And for whatever reason, it might be like 300, it might be $30,000 annually. It might be like 300, it might be 3 million, but they hit that plateau. Breaking through those plateaus is one of the things, like a good instructor, like, when you've got a bunch of guys on the line, how do we break that guy how do we break through those plateaus? How do we drive his split times down or anything? This tactical circumstance absolutely translates over to the business world. So it's not only the fact like, hey, go out and invent something, improve the circumstance of your profession, and prove that you are a professional in your industry. I always try to recommend that. Like, dude, you're an idea guy, man. You brought me like 5 ideas, and it's like, why are you not doing this? Like, why are you asking me, like, BlackRifle Coffee and Evan Hafer to talk to you about some load carrying gear item? Like, dude, I don't sell that unless it's got a coffee mug in it. Like, it's not my it's not my jam, dude.
Or it holds a bag of coffee.
Yeah, it holds a bag of coffee. But it's not that I don't have a passion for it. That's probably a bad analogy in the sense of like, it's like guys want me to sell a fucking balloon widget or something. It's like, dude, I know a little bit about this, but ultimately I'm just going to say, hey, go out and create, put things across the line, like get a prototype. And, like coming back to that original conversation is how do you even like get your first prototype? Like, you've got this fucking bad idea, man. Like it's awesome. Where do you start?
It really helps to know a guy.
Yeah.
It's 3D printers are amazing, right?
Right.
We when we first got started, that didn't exist, or at least it didn't exist at a scale that a small startup could go play with it.
Right.
I remember when we got our first MakerBot, right? And this plywood thing, but it was incredible. You could CAD something up and feed it through the system, and 2 hours later, you've got a little piece or part. There are some really neat new websites for machine work. Like if you've got to have something spun up.
Right.
But it's like everything else, it's all about networking. How do you get that first prototype? You either build it yourself, and you might build it yourself out of plywood,
Right.
or bubble gum. Or you call somebody that and say, hey, could you help me with this? Probably the plateau that you were talking about, right? That the hardest thing for most inventors or entrepreneurs is giving up the control, right? So you hit that $3 million mark or that $300 mark, and it's like, you're not the smartest guy in the room, and you better go find some help, right? Build a team for yourself.
Right.
And that's, from the day you decide to do something until the day that you're done doing something, if you're not looking to build a team around it, find the people that know the most that you can find, you're not ultimately going to be successful.
Right.
It's like the patent thing, right? I've got a dozen friends that are attorneys, but none that are patent attorneys, because to be a patent attorney, you have to have an engineering degree first, and then you go to law school.
Wow.
So, like you spoke that you work with a really good IP firm, and that's I think it's another piece of advice for anybody that says, I've got to go get a patent. You can't just call, your regular attorney or your buddy's attorney, right? You have to go out and do the research and make sure that you're working with a valid IP firm,
Right.
Because otherwise you might as well just go on what's the website where you can file patents. LegalZoom.
Oh yeah.
For me, I've made, like I said earlier, I've made a prototype out of nylon, tubular nylon, just 1/2-inch nylon that you got for free, a roll of it, and staples. I've done it out of cardboard and tape, all the way to full on CNC machine parts and pieces, and I'm not afraid of, still to this day, to go back and build a prototype, my first prototype, out of cardboard, because I want to see and put it together. We did a weapon sketch. The first one of our weapon sketches that we built was like a V-shaped weapon sketch. We were tired of the C-shaped and some of the other things, and we built it out of balsa wood.
Right.
With hinges on it. We got some, tiny little, brass hinges from like Franklin's craft store or whatever, and built the thing out of balsa wood. And we'd sit there and play around and, all right, is this going to fold and lock how we want it to? It was, maybe $5 worth of product, but we had to see it physically work to know how that would, to hand it to someone and say, all right, draw this. Or is this even a good idea or not? And so you just can't be afraid to use what you have at your disposal. And again, it's just it's that might be your barrier of entry. It's like, well, I'm not going to spend the 2 hours to tinker with this piece. And I think you were talking earlier, sitting in your basement, making your slings, and yep, I got it. And it wasn't the first time you made that one sling that it was. This is exactly how I want it. Every buckle, every stitch, everything. There's no way. Yeah, you just have to spend that time and effort.
And I think that's a big key, which is like those barriers of entry most of the time are just the fact that you're doing it. Like you're just going to do it. And whether it's balsa wood or like 550 cord and, tubular nylon and staples and cardboard, showing somebody or even yourself that you can put something together and make it work. Like, man, that's like oftentimes I've seen it like that is like the first step. The first step is just go get a bunch of stuff and start tinkering, start working with the material. I can't emphasize that enough. Guys with great ideas, like just like fucking millions of them. They just really want somebody else to take on the responsibility. Like, I don't want to fail. I don't want to look like a jackass. I don't have the time. There's a million excuses why, I can't do something. But if you just eliminate that fear factor and say, I'm not afraid to fail. Fuck it. You know what? I'm going to do it. And it might not work. Like, like more times than not, it's actually not going to work the first time right. It's not going to.
Thinking about it, Nick. So we've hit a lot on like actual like physical products, and one thing that I think we neglect on it was tech, right? So like you can't just sit down and code, for an app or whatever tech you have, but you can absolutely sit there and draw your ideas, even if it's a crown and a piece of paper, and draw it out and watch the flow of your tech. Right, you might not be a coder, but you have this idea for how this app or widget or whatever it is going to be put together, and you have a crown and a piece of paper, and you can take it and at least get some schematics built out for that tech. And so, that could be step one. That's how I built my first prototype in this. And so you don't have to physically hold something. It could just be a picture of it and drawing it out and seeing what it is. And then, you can progress from there.
Right. Well, gosh dang, guys, we're already at an hour. We're at 57 minutes. That's part 1 and 2. We're gonna get ready because we're gonna break down the podcast, and we're gonna take it over to a live stream scenario for Blackhearted tonight. At the MGM Level Up is where we're headed tonight. Granted, this isn't live, but we are going to record that. You guys will be able to access the Blackhearted live stream from MGM in Las Vegas. So this is Evan Hafer, Sean Matson.
Bruce Schley.
I can never... I know the first name. The last name I like. Bruce Slay. I don't want to mispronounce it. Bruce Slay. Just
come off,
Frank
Mike.
Proctor. Yeah, sure. Frank Proctor from Way of the Gun. Thanks a lot, fellas, for showing up. We appreciate the conversation about patents. Hope to have you guys back.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, dude.
Black Rifle Coffee Company, along with Arson Wave, would like to thank you for tuning in to Blackhearted. Have a great fucking day.